Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. Got a good one in store for you guys here today. I got Rich Haynes from Sound Ag. Rich, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Mark. Thanks. I really appreciate being on here today.
Yeah, excited to learn more about you, learn a little bit about sound, and dive into intentional leadership. So, let's get it started. What does it mean for you to be intentional?
Well, first off, it's a really good question. And it's kind of interesting. So, just real quick. So, my wife and I every year we don't do New Year's Eve resolutions. Because I just think I don't like huge, long goals like that. And we can talk about that a little bit. But
Yep.
we do choose a word that we use to kind of help define the year. And this was interesting. So, the word I chose for this year was intentional. So when Zach
Wow,
contacted me about this, I just thought it was kind of fortuitous. Um,
that's funny.
But so for me, though, being intentional, I think it really starts with defining a vision. And then once you have that vision, then it's making really deliberate choices and then actions based on those choices to ensure the success of that decision that you made.
Yeah.
Um, now that's personally, organizationally, it's taking that same concept and then just making sure that stakeholders and the folks that are on your team understand why and then are bought in as well.
Right. I love the definition, and it's very similar in a way to my 3-word definition, which we're going to unveil here in another month or so of intention. After 60 episodes or so that I've recorded of this, I ask that question every time, and we get very different answers. If you go through and listen to all the episodes, you'll hear a different take.
Mhm.
Similarities, sure, right, but a lot of different takes. And so I've put together the framework to actually share, like, this is what I think it is based on what I'm gleaning from all these leaders. But I love your answer here. It's like, that vision followed by deliberate choices followed by execution, right? Going to
Yep.
get it done. I want to go
Yep.
back to the word of the year though, because this is something that we practice in our coaching programs for our executive level coaching clients. My wife and I also do word of the year. We think that, and we've learned sometimes the hard way over the years, that choosing a word has a lot of power. There's a lot of power in
Mhm.
choosing your word. So curious, where did that practice come from for you guys? How'd you get into that?
Um, that's interesting. So I think it actually came from, like I said, we lived in Minneapolis for quite a while. I was working at AGCO at the time, and she was at General Mills, and she was working with, I believe it was a consulting coach
Oh,
through General Mills leadership program, and it was kind of that. And we were like, well, we didn't want huge goals. We were starting a family and everything, and it was like, what can we do that's definable that we can both sit down and talk about with each other, and then kind of build a little story around, and then talk about it at the end of the year and have things to look back on.
right.
It's been a really good little practice.
Yeah, it is a very cool practice. One of the things that has happened for me over the years, so one year I know I chose integrity as my word of the year, and that was great. So I was like, I really wanted to make sure that my work was in integrity with my purpose and everything was aligned and so on and so forth. And what was interesting for me over the course of the year, of course, life showed me, God showed me everywhere in life that I was not in integrity. Right? It was like
Yeah.
like an application, right? A fuller application of integrity over my life, and and it showed, it exposed, right, every part, right, that wasn't, and that what that meant
Mhm.
is I got to go to work on that to become, to allow that. Same with other words. Sometimes I've heard people choose like the word alignment as an example. Well, guess what? Life is going to show you every area where you're not in alignment, and that.
Mhm.
So sometimes I think my point with a lot of this is, when people are doing personal development, they often think, I make a decision, I'm going to pursue a goal, I'm going to pursue a word, I'm going to pursue better, and it's like hockey stick up to the right, like that's the movement. That's sort of what
Mhm.
we expect, or we send somebody to training and then we expect hockey stick up to the right, sort of improvement over time, but it doesn't work that way, right?
Unfortunately, it does not. There's not a direct, and sometimes there's not even a direct correlation, right? It's could
Exactly.
be pieces of a puzzle that take a little longer to really get put together.
Yeah. So a couple years ago I started studying intention, and guess what? I've gotten to evaluate every area of my life that I can find where I haven't been intentional. And so I'm anxious to hear the year-end report to see what you and your wife learn from having intentional as your word of the year, man.
I
So
think it'll be good, and we can talk about it here as we keep going forward, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it came from, really picking and choosing, as you work for a couple startups, you get, there's so many things, there's always something to do, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
choosing what really matters and what's going to help drive the envelope forward, not necessarily for you always personally, but team wise, and then organizationally as a whole. And then,
For sure.
deciding, and hey, do you want to do 20 things pretty good, or do you want to do 10 things really well? And it's being intentional about that.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Well, you guys are making some waves in the market. You've been bringing on a lot of great people, a lot of good talent over there, and capturing some market share. If we think about intentional leadership, what are you guys doing to be able to attract and retain good folks and keep things moving in the right direction?
Um, the
Or
talent
what's
retention.
Rich's
Oh,
take on that? Yeah.
yeah, what's my take on it? Yeah, I think, you look at ag as a whole, and I always like the quote that good people find ways to work together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you've looked at there's been a lot of different smaller startups in ag that have come and gone over the last 15 years, and there's been some consolidation, but if you look at a lot of the core people, a lot of those same people are there, whether it's they just, we used to joke around at ag shows, where you'd go and, hey, everybody, it's all the same people. It's just what color shirts everybody wearing, right? And it's
Yeah.
and I think a lot of that starts with that talent retention piece. It's number one, having a good culture that's open, that's inclusive, that I say actively listens. It's not just, hey, we take your feedback on this form, or we have this meeting. It's, hey, we really try to listen and then make changes organizationally to reflect what we think should be the core culture of the company. My personal take is, I think that we get a lot of rope to do things with. So there's a lot of decision making ability, and I'm a big proponent of a great work environment equals great work. So
Mm,
if you're presented that opportunity to enjoy what you're doing, enjoy the environment that you're in, then you have a much higher opportunity to succeed. And I think that's what we try to do here as Sound is, make sure people are heard, make sure people are appreciated, they have opportunities to contribute and be heard, and then, help let them, we have our company goals, everybody has goals, but it's really working with people to help define what their goals are, what the company goals are, and then
mm.
try to align those to make sure that everybody's bought in.
Yeah. Yeah. You run a pretty decent sized team that's spread out geographically across the Eastern US. And so how much does autonomy play into that as like this, as an important piece? I know we all like to have autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes maybe we don't execute so well, and so we lose autonomy. But just curious, like how do you manage that across such a vast team and geography?
um, well, I think that all comes back to that talent retention piece, but it also comes back to hiring good people piece. So it's like you have to make sure that you hire the right people, you put them in the right position, and you listen to them and give them opportunities to grow. And then I feel like when they have that desire to grow, then they also have a desire to try to help the company grow. And then you realize those
Mhm.
goals are aligned. Then it's like, okay, it's not so much, hey, are you doing this? Hey, did you check this box? It's, hey, how are we coming toward the progress on these, quarterly objectives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They say you can only manage what you measure,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
that's yeah.
So there's got to be some of that. But I know people also crave autonomy. People talk a lot about culture. This is one area that we get to work a lot in. We help a lot of companies with as a component of their culture building, and so we get a front row seat to it a lot of times. Just curious
Mm-hmm.
from your perspective, what's really important as it pertains to culture building. A lot of people give it lip service. I think very few do a great job of executing on it. Well, what's important for you?
um it's interesting when you start talking about actually building and continuing to build an intentional culture as a
Mhm.
uh, mostly remote team, right? So we're California based, so we have a lot of people centered at the lab out in California.
Yep.
We have an awesome people team, so I want to give them a quick little shout out. But
Yeah.
we've done a really good job at, I think, defining just like, for what we call, like, our company values. It's like
Hmm.
boldness, respect, tenacity, and ownership. And
Hmm.
it's pretty easy to define, inside of those, and give people recognition for, just doing different things throughout the company. And I think we try to be really cognizant of that.
Hmm.
Um, it's always something we can strive to be a little bit better at, and that's something I try to be better at. That it's, hey, how can I make sure that I give, um, shout outs and credit, and make sure I do that for folks.
Sure.
But we do that as a whole company, so it's something that's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I know people appreciate the recognition, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge piece. When we always refer to Tony Robbins' basic human needs, of which one of those is significance. And it's so simple to instill in your culture, to create
Yeah.
a place. Like, it's so simple to just create
Yeah.
a space that is intentional about recognizing the progress that people are making,
Mm-hmm.
wins that they've had. Now, the reality is, in many cases, what gets recognized most often is what's not going well. Right? We glaze over a lot of that, and that causes, some negative culture play, some unintentional negative downstream effects, of some of those decisions. But it's, so simple, so important. Recognition is huge.
Well,
I
I think. Oh, so I was just going to say that I think you have to be, and that comes back to this intentionality piece. But as you're, trying to manage a bigger team, or working with your counterparts, managing the other parts of the team, or you're, like my boss, it's, how do we make sure that all of our meetings aren't just, marching orders, or, hey, this is what we're not doing well. It's,
Yeah.
making sure that we recognize and really give people time to speak around what is going well, why is it going well, how is that helping you, how can we help broaden that across the company.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what percentage of your time, or I don't know if you break it down by percentages, but how do you allocate time from and it takes time to sit back and be intentional. It takes time. You got to sit back and be strategic. Then there's also, like, I got to get out there and make stuff happen,
Mm-hmm.
which we get caught up in the day to day of the making of the stuff happen a lot. And I'm just curious how that plays out for you.
I think one of the toughest parts of my role currently, or a lot of other folks I've talked to in a similar role, is time management. And that's one of the things we all try to get a little bit better about how do you balance, time's that one resource that you can't get any more of, and it's, can only allocate so much of it, and everybody would like, hopefully, to have some of it. So it's,
Yeah, yeah.
um, I've been trying to be a lot more cognizant about being a little bit more forward planning, where it's, hey, try to avoid last minute things, last minute trips, where it's like, okay, hey, I've got clear time on my calendar, like, call me. If I'm I do tend to drive a lot. I like driving, so
Yep.
I try to make that as time where I'm going to be on the phone. So I get a list of people to call, and, hey,
Yep.
let's just catch up. No, I'm not calling you to have a meeting. I'm not calling you to have an agenda. Let's just chat.
Right. Right.
And I think that really helps sometimes foster those relationships.
Hmm. I agree. I mean, often it's just those unplanned moments where we get to actually connect with people and not just be in the grind,
Yeah.
all the time, that are really, really meaningful. So,
And I
um,
think, I was
yeah.
going to say, just one part of that too is also knowing that you have to let yourself stop sometimes. So
Mhm.
it's like your brain can't always, like, I notice if I try to be active and thinking too much consistently, then I need to, it's not that intentionality piece, but like, set a little time on your calendar, like, step away for a little bit, like, let your brain rest for a few minutes, and then come back with a little reinvigorization, and get back after it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do at least a meditation, if not like a 10-minute nap every day at 2 o'clock.
Oh, nice.
I kid you not. I mean, I don't care where. I'll do it in my truck. I'll do it under a tree. I was doing a training one time at the corporate headquarters of a client, and we had a small break, like right kind of right around after right after lunch. I just went out there and, like, took 10 minutes under a tree, just closed my eyes, because it sharpens the saw for me. Like, it sharpens the blade. I'm better.
Mm-hmm.
I have more energy to get through the back half of the afternoon, which I think for a lot of people, right, that back half of the afternoon is the toughest time to
Mm-hmm.
productive. At least for dudes, I think that's true. My wife crushes it in the afternoon. I crush it in the morning, and we're totally opposite that way. Yeah, it's one of those. You got to have those. Also, since you brought it up, like the idea of, like, actually taking intentional time to rejuvenate. Like, what about actually being present for yourself when you do take a weekend,
Mm-hmm.
Saturday, Sunday, or go on a vacation with your family, right? Go somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere with your wife. Like, I don't know what your situation is, but I know a lot of guys, a lot of folks that come through our programs are constantly glued to that phone, still answering email while they're going up the ski lift, right?
Uh,
You're skiing with the family.
yeah, my wife hassled me because there was like, I went on like I don't know, probably 6 or 7 year run where I didn't go on a vacation without my computer. Just,
Oof.
there's always something, you're like, I might need it just to, you always justify. It's like, oh, I might want to book a reservation or something. But back of your mind, you're like, yeah, I'm just going to check my email.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, but yeah, so you definitely do need to. I just went on a trip here just a few weeks ago to Costa Rica, and the first time
Oh,
for a
cool.
while I didn't take my computer, so
Good for
that
you.
was nice.
Good for
But I
you.
did have time to read a couple books, which was good.
Yeah. Well, there's, obviously being in my world, I study all kinds of different personal development. And we study high performance habits from different coaches. And the one thing that's consistent across all the coaches is the importance of actually taking that time, like leaving the laptop home, at minimum, leave it in the hotel, and actually just don't think about work for a day or two, or five if you're in Costa Rica, because it's beautiful there and you should just go do Costa Rica things.
Yeah.
So we love it down there. We'd love to acquire some property and spend more time down there
Oh,
in
that's great.
future years for sure. So good stuff, man. What have been some major hurdles that you've had to overcome in your career? I know you've been from big companies to now more like startup type companies, and these kind of things. What's been the big hurdles for you from a leadership standpoint?
Um, you know, it, there's always, there's a ton, right? There's always lots of things you look
Of
back on
course, yeah.
and think that, it's
That's why we
hurdles are
have
what
jobs.
what gets you to where you're at, right? It's that
Yeah.
whole, tear down to build up mentality. But I think, like I said, time management's always been one. But it's, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of, you throw yourself into a job, and at some point you kind of, especially when we hit like COVID and everything, those lines between work and home really started to blur. And it's like, oh yeah, I can work, until time to put the kids to bed. Then I can go back and I can work another 3, 4 hours until 10. It's fine. Like, you can do that for quite a while. So I think that time management piece has always been one. I think that setting fluid goals has always been one. Like, as I've been coming up, it's like we've always had goals of whether it's sales goals or quarterly goals, or there's always the metric to hit. And most of the time, those have always been really static. So it's, here's
Mm.
the goal, go hit it. And it's like whatever you need to do, make sure you hit that goal. And sometimes maybe your company goal changes, but that goal didn't. So then you still need to hit this almost arbitrary goal, but you still need to hit it because it's your goal. But you're
Yeah.
like, well, why? And like, well, how is this helping move things forward? And I think really being fluid about goal alignment with like kind of that vision, like I mentioned at the beginning, is been a kind of a hurdle. Um, and as becoming a leader, I just personally, I've always liked to be heavily involved, with accounts I'm involved with when I was doing
Mhm.
sales with. So, as you've moved into more of a leadership role, it's allowing yourself to kind of take the back seat and try to really encourage your team to shine and to step up and to do a lot of those things, and to really help them try to do the best they can to be successful. And I think that's, something we all still, well, at least I still work on a little bit. So
I think the real driver behind all of us as intentional leaders or want to be intentional leaders is the service of others. Right?
mhm.
We know that it's our job to multiply whatever resources we've been given and try to help make things better, help other people be more successful. In the beginning and starting my company, like I just wanted to be on stages. I wanted to be the guy speaking. Like that was the initial motivation. I was in the pursuit of that passion. And then over the years, I did get to do that. Now it's more fun to see um, my team step in front of that room, right, and do the job. And just the other day, we actually had one of our clients decided to take our content and we, certified them and gave them the blessing. They actually ran their own version of what we do for their company without we weren't even there. They sent us the pictures. It looked just like we had been there. But it's like that's what's cool when you take that really intentional approach to leadership, and you're like, yeah, there are challenges, there's grind, but we have this vision, this picture, like you said, this thing that we're moving towards, and then like seeing other people be able to step up and succeed in those roles is really cool.
Mhm.
So awesome, man. What's been one of your big wins?
Um, I mean, I really like to this last conversation point. Like, I just really
Yeah.
like, when I hear from other people cross functional that, hey, the people on your team are the people, and I guess back to a hurdle too. It's like you want to make sure you hire the right people for the role. So sometimes you always don't, but knowing that you did, and then getting feedback from, oh, hey, this person's really making an impact, doing things that I didn't even ask, or someone didn't ask them to do, but they're stepping up because they want to. And then you've, number one, helped hire the right person, but number two, really helped facilitate them to feel comfortable to step up and do those things is a big win for me. So
Yeah. Perfect, man. I love it. What has there been anybody along the way over the course of your career, mentor wise, or maybe somebody who kicked you in the butt along the way that you really have that you appreciate now?
uh, I mean, they're both still working, but like when I first started my career, I started out at AGCO, and I got to work with Dr. Wollenhopt, and name's now Wollenhopt, and then Dr. Joe Tevis.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those guys are still involved in ag, but they both kind of helped me really kind of develop a passion for agriculture as an industry. And then they were trying to always push the boundaries of, like, I started back in like precision data management, right when it
Mm-hmm.
kind of started, dating myself a little bit with the Falcon system with FieldStar. And it was, how can we take that and then really drive this technology to have ROI at the farm gate, where nobody else or a lot of other people didn't believe in that technology and in those systems. And I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that's, now it's multiplied itself to be a massive industry, and it's, data is so
Yeah.
important, and it's such a critical piece of a farmer's business and value. Just that foundation really helped drive a lot of the things I did moving forward.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's got to have been cool to sort of be at the forefront of some of that technological innovation in, over the course of your career and now see how far it's come. Right. I mean,
Yeah,
just
it's
really,
crazy to
you've
think
had
the
a front row
evolution in
seat
just
to
the
all of it.
last
Yeah.
15 years. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, it's crazy to think about when we first started this, right? Like, we were just getting the capability to allow the GPS signals to be used by civilian population, especially in agriculture. So you had,
Mm-hmm.
WASP signals, you had, if you could steer, you were 50, you knew you were in the field, you had 10, 15 feet of accuracy, and now we're able to steer things down to the millimeter, doing
Mm.
pulling tile plows, laying concrete. So it's really interesting, some of the stuff that's come around.
It's super wild. And if you think about like how quickly all that's taken place, and then, the whole Moore's law kind of thing
Mhm.
that comes into place, and now it goes exponential. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, we're thinking about this, as sort of mid-career, still young leaders in the ag industry. We got another 20 years left in the fighting chair,
Hmm.
right? So, what do you like? How do we get intentional about leading the technological change over the next? I'm totally riffing with you on this because I don't know the,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm interested in your take on like how do we intentionally lead that next generation of farmer, the next generation of employee serving the farmer. I mean, there's a kind of a big job here.
It is. It's a big job, and honest. It's kind of interesting too that there's starting to be more eyes on it. I think, just as you start talking with people and going to shows and have a conversation with people. But I think, and not to say that sound is the best, but like, we're trying to do a really good job about being thought leaders just in the space. And I think that's what anybody in this area can do. Is it's really about education to the farmer and to the next generation of farmer, to your point of
Yeah.
like why this is important. I think soil health is becoming so much more of a conversation piece, and people are starting to really talk about, when you think about where do we source a lot of our fertilizers from, like, we don't necessarily want to be writing checks to some of the people that we're writing checks to, for phosphorus, but we sometimes have to because that's where it's sourced. So it's,
Mm-hmm.
how do we bring things back into the country? How do we reutilize what we already have here in better and more innovative ways, and at the same time build a more resilient system for food security here? And if you really want to go out on a limb, I think, if you think about just national security, I think food is a big piece of that. And I think being able to help people understand that taking care of the soil, utilizing what is there, is just going to yield dividends for all of us, as we keep moving forward.
Absolutely, man. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think, and just last little thought there, I think farmers
Yeah,
sometimes get a little bit of a bad rap just because, there's been still a big disconnect between where people think their food comes from and where it actually does come from.
of course.
So I
Yeah.
think helping to bridge that divide, a little bit more with this kind of younger generation, I think they're doing a good job with it of helping people really understand, what it does take to help feed all of these people to get all the food actually from the field to the shelf. Like there's this huge infrastructure in
Mhm.
place that it takes to do that, and helping people understand that, I think, um,
Yeah.
helps drive home that whole message.
Yeah. Well, and I think some of the data driven insights that are now that we're now able to get obviously make it easier both for farmers to make decisions, but then also for general public to understand maybe a little bit more at a granular level what's going on. I'll be having conversations with even family members who maybe didn't come from the ag background that I did, don't have the level of knowledge that I do, and mine is fairly minuscule compared to most. But I'm just drawing some correlations between, well, this is what you think you want to see. Well, did you know that, I mean, a lot of farmers are doing this and this and this.
Mhm.
Right? Like they're working on ways, right, to whatever take advantage of sequestering carbon, and they're working on ways to make the soil, to improve the soil, improve soil health, and so on and so forth. I mean, I
Mhm.
think there's just these sort of blanket assumptions that people are not, or that farmers are not doing these things, right? There are unintentional assumptions that people are not doing these things. You know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
good stuff, man. Well, what you said, you mentioned you read a couple books when you were in Costa Rica. What are you reading? What do you recommend for people to pick up here these days?
It was actually one of my, like I mentioned, like here at Sound we use the OKR system, so I kind of wanted to know where that came from. So I read "Measuring What Matters" from John Doerr. It was a really interesting book, but it's just being able to really about consistently tracking, setting smaller, measurable goals, and then reading that one actually led me into reading the 12-year plan. Brian Moran and Michael Lennington.
Hmm.
That one of the big things there was it's setting small measurable goals that lead you into your bigger one, and it's the number one of the things that I liked from them was one of the number one things you need to sacrifice um, to achieve or to be great to execute your goals is you need to sacrifice your comfort. So
Mhm.
it's really being willing to step outside your comfort zone, step outside what you've kind of defined as your role limitations, and really looking forward to how do you manage your time wisely and then not get in that cycle of complacency to
Yeah.
keep developing yourself and then through that helping the company.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a look at those. When last week we ran in a training for about 35 ag retail employees from a couple of different co-ops in Ames, Iowa, and we took them out for a workout. And in the
Nice.
morning, and it was at a CrossFit gym. And on one of the rowing machines in the CrossFit gym, it says, and this is like the motto for this particular gym, said, "Comfort is a slow death."
Oh,
you
and I got
know,
one other book now that you mentioned that I think that's good that I've read a couple times, but Extreme Ownership.
yeah,
You
man.
yeah, the how you by Yako.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that seems to be the number one most recommended book on this podcast
Does
so
it?
far.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
extreme.
right.
And the dichotomy of leadership too that follows that actually is a
Mhm.
really good book too. But I love the idea of extreme ownership. It gives, obviously it puts it on you as the leader, right? If your team's not performing,
Take responsibility for the failures is
your
my big
responsibility.
takeaway. Yeah. And then also I'm reading Star Wars, like the smaller books for my kids. So just like
Oh, yeah.
make sure you take the time to do that. That's important too.
That's good. I've been reading. Are you familiar with the Tuttle Twins
I'm not.
book series? So there's a guy in Utah who wrote like a series of children's books. I think there's 13 in the series that teach kids the conservative principles. Let's just say that conservative
Okay.
principles about the economy, teach them like how the government works, how laws are supposed to work, what money really is, how money works. It teaches entrepreneurship, and it goes through a whole series. So it's really cool. It's been one of those intentional things I'm doing with my 8-year-old son. He's the youngest of six in our family, and my last
Awesome.
chance to get it right. So you take everything that you learned over the years, and you try to be really intentional with the last one, and give him everything's, and it's apparent very different with him than I did the last several. But yeah, it's a great little book series, the Tuttle Twins.
I'll
And
check it out. I've got 3 young boys, so I'll have to.
yeah, they'll get into it. So good stuff, man. Any last thoughts before we fully bring it in for a landing? I have one more question I want to ask, but just curious on any more thoughts that you'd have on intentional leadership, or how we reach out and learn more about sound.
Um, I guess my last take is like we kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think that, the whole part about being a really good leader is how do you duplicate or multiply yourself, and how do you develop other leaders? And I think that's what, the really great leaders I could look at that I've been, or managers I've had in the past, it's always been, how do they encourage me to grow and to be better? So that's, what I try to do when I'm managing my team. And I guess the last takeaway there for sound is, sound.ag is our website. We're a great solution for nutrient management, especially coming into an interesting season. As well, not a living microbe. It's a chemistry that helps get nitrogen and phosphorus into the plant. So check it out. If you have questions, just reach out.
Love it. Sound.ag. Got it, man. All right. Last take. I want to talk a little bit about vulnerability in your world. So what play does vulnerability have in your intentional leadership?
Vulnerability is an interesting one, especially when you're in an agricultural space, in my opinion. It's one of those things that a lot of people don't necessarily want to confront or talk about, but we try to be intentional. Like I help lead a unconscious bias group. I did in the past, at one of our last offsites. And I think that really, like being intentional, for lack of a better term, about, being willing to open up and sharing some of your kind of personal insights around why you do things the way you do, or when something didn't go well, why didn't it? And being open and honest with not just yourself, but with your team about that. And I think that encourages them to do the same. And I do think that is, is it a critical part of a team? I think there'd be two different sides to that argument. But I think if you really want to build one that's going to last a long time and drive a lot of success and value as a group forward for the company, then it is really important to have that interconnectedness in your team.
Yeah, so true, man. So incredibly important, and a great place to bring this in for a landing. So, Rich, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for being on the show, man.
Mark, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And this was really fun.
You bet.